Cute tiny robots are probably my most favourite thing that I like to model. I've recently created a completely new way to animate my little friends. Traditionally, you'll be told to use an IK bone bound to a follow path constraint, and while that's a pretty solid method, I've found a much better way. In this tutorial, you'll learn how to easily create an adorable little robot character with tons of personality, and I'll also show you how to rig your creation so that he procedurally reacts to his movement. If at any point throughout this video you learn something new, then hit that like button. And if you enjoy this content at any point, then hit that subscribe as well. So the first thing we'll do is we'll actually clean up our scene, because we don't really want to clutter up things. So I'm just going to move all the objects related to the render into a new collection. I'm going to call that set. And then we're just going to hide this. We don't need that right now. Also, I'm going to get rid of the default hue. And we're going to rename this collection to Robot Body. Okay, that's all we need to do to set up. So what we'll do to begin with is we will start with a new mesh. And I'm going to go with a cylinder. And what I'm going to aim to do is kind of have like a tall, thin kind of robot. So there we go. That's the basic shape that we're going to go for. I'm just going to move this up a little bit. This little guy's going to need a face. So make a cut here. I'm probably going to say that makes a good LCD size, I'd say. Now, if we eye to inset this, because we're going to need a little border on that. And again, there we go. And we're just going to shade this auto smooth. And I like to start to work with materials quite early on, because when I see the different colors, it kind of lets me get a feel for the object a little bit easier. So we'll start off with a new material, and we'll call this shell. And another new material, and this we'll just call LCD. So let's come into viewport shading. And first of all, we'll assign the LCD material to the faces that we've selected. And then we will come to the shell, because this will have applied to the model already. And we can change the base color. So we can go for maybe a nice powder blue, perhaps. Just about there. And with the LCD screen, we can change this down to pretty dark down here. I always like to put a little bit of a green tint to the LCD screens. But I think in this case, as we've got a little blue guy, we can maybe make it a blue color. There we go. Now this doesn't look fantastic at this stage, don't worry about that. So first things first, I want to create the roughness. I want to put that right up and the specular right down on this LCD screen. I want to make it pretty dark. And we're going to put on here a clear coat. Just going to crank that all the way up. So now we've got a little bit of a shine on there. And now with the shell, we're going to do the same kind of idea. I'm going to put the specular right up. I'm going to set the roughness to 0.1. And I think this gives us a lovely kind of plasticky material, right? So let's start making this thing look a little bit more robotic-like. So what we can do is we can bevel these edges like this. Put a few, maybe like that. I think that's a nice shape, because what we're looking to do is we're looking to put a subsurf modifier on this. So we can do that with Control 2. I'm just going to add a couple of loop cuts in here to kind of make the LCD screen a little bit bigger. Sorry, I can't decide. Maybe like that. There we go. That looks much better. Okay, so we're just going to take this loop around here. I'm just going to bevel this. Oh heavens, that looks terrible. There we go. So we want just a very, very tiny bevel around that loop. I'm going to take the inner one, and we're just going to Alt-S and scale that in just a little bit. Don't need too much. Just use Shift key if you want a little bit of fine control. And all this is doing is it's making a very, very subtle groove. You can see that? So it looks like the LCD screen is set actually into the object, as opposed to being a painted surface on there. Now let's duplicate this bottom face and press P and then selection to make it its own object. And then we'll come into this and we're going to extrude this out, come down, maybe like to there perhaps. And let's delete these materials from it as well. So we're going to use a different material. I'm going to call this rubber, not rubber, rubber. And for this one, I want the color to be a very, very dark gray right down there. And we're going to put the specular all the way down and the roughness all the way up. We're going to take both these edge loops for the top and bottom and Control B to bevel. And we're going to have a tiny bevel on there. So there we go. Now, I think that looks a little bit too deep, so we'll use this this toggle X-ray option here and invert select mode. Just grab the bottoms and Z, move it up there like that. Now I'm going to duplicate this thing with Shift D and then Z, move it down a little bit. I'm going to come into the materials properties. We're going to remove the rubber one. And we're going to make like a chrome or something. And we're going to move that to like maybe a mid-gray. I'm going to change the metallic. I'm going to leave those settings exactly as they are. And then you can just come into, probably say scale this, but not on the Z axis. Get to about there. Grab it, move it up a little bit just so it intersects. I think this one we could probably get away with it being a little bit deeper. So I think that probably is going to be the general kind of structure of the robot. So what we'll do is we'll take these and we'll rename them. So body, and I'm actually quite comfortable taking these and then just joining them. with that one actually. I'll make it a little simpler for us. Just going to move this and this up just a little bit, just using Shift key, just so it intersects it. There we go. Okay, next we're going to work on the legs. We're going to do the legs separately, and we probably want to be aiming for 4 legs really. I need to take that into consideration when I'm making the legs. We've only got this very limited space, so I think for this we're going to have kind of tiny legs. So we'll begin by adding with a cylinder. It's probably the best option. So we're in edit mode. We're just going to rotate this on the y-axis by 90 degrees, and then we're going to scale it kind of tiny, so 0.1. So it's going to be the point we're starting from, I'd say. Grab this, move it to the side, the x-axis. So this is going to be like the tip, I suppose. Let's turn X-ray off for the minute, so we don't need that. And then let's just extrude this out a little bit, and then bevel it. We want a nice round little tip there. So let's add on the shell material, and then let's add on another material, and we're going to pick the rubber, and we're going to assign the rubber to that section of faces, and grab that little extra one there. We're going to do a similar thing with this thing. We're going to bevel it. One small bevel. For this, I'm just going to Alt-E and extrude along face normals. Just bring that in a tiny smidgen. You can see there that when we add a subsurface, it just kind of brings it in a little bit, looks like a separate object. And then we need to W and shade auto smooth. Go back into edit mode, and then let's bevel this end bit just like that. In fact, I'm going to wait for beveling that. Let's just put a loop in here, scale it out a little bit, bevel this, just put a few loops in, it kind of smooths it out. It gives us a nice interesting shape, and now we can bevel this. So there we go, we kind of got like a foot thing going on there, little pad. As you can imagine, that would be like on the floor like that, I suppose. I'm just going to grab this and just drag it out. Grab X. I'm just using the proportional editing just to make this pad a little bit, there we go, a little bit bigger, but just keeping it nice and smooth. Right, so we now need to add extra little sections to the leg. I'm going to go with like a ball and a stick and a ball and a stick, I suppose. So just to keep things, viewport, we'll do cast selected. Let's add mesh, UV sphere, in edit mode, scale 0.1, I guess, on the X. And then we can rotate that on the Y by 90 degrees. And so that's a little bit bigger than we need. So let's just bring it down a little bit, just like that. And then W to shade smooth. And then we can add our chrome material to that. Do the same with the cylinder, scale it down to 0.1. This is inside this object, right? So rotate Y90, grab on the x-axis, and then scale by maybe 0.5, no, 0.2 perhaps, better. And then we can just grab that on the x and intersect it just there. And now we can Shift D to duplicate that, bring that to there, and we've got the first section of the leg. Now, all we need to do, front face mode, grab these, Shift D, and then along the x-axis. And there we've got a pretty snazzy little leg, but it looks a little bit kind of naked, I suppose. So shade auto smooth to begin with, and go into edit mode. Probably add some detail. So maybe grab these, and then we can say Alt-E and extrude along face normals. Bring these out a little bit, and then Control plus to select the edges, and then we can add another material, and we can just add that to the shell there, and then maybe add the loop cuts here, and scale on the X 0.5, and the same for this one, scale on the X 0.5, and select those loops, Alt-E, extrude along face normals, bring those out, Control plus, and then assign those well. That just gives it a little bit of extra character, I suppose. It's not, do what you want really. All looks pretty cool. Right, so this leg, let's join this all together. In fact, let's first of all Shift S, cast selected, and what we're doing here is we're making this the origin. So I've just moved the cursor to that point on the center of that sphere. Then we do origin, sorry, object, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. Next, I'm going to grab this foot, and then the leg, Control J, and join them all together, because I like things all as nice uniform objects. So now we can let's say, okay, is that about the right size? Put it there, let's sort of test fit it. I guess that kind of looks incredibly tiny, but it's adorable, I think. How would it look bigger? The thing I've got to consider is we need to get multiple legs in here as well. So that's just something to take into consideration, but let's go with tiny legs. We can change them if we want later. Right, so Alt-R and Alt-G to reset that position. Next thing we need to do is we need to add an armature. So let's reset cursor. I'm going to add in a new armature. And the first thing we should do with this is we come into the object properties here, come to viewport display, and then we want to put in front, and then we're going to put wire there. So it's always visible, but it doesn't quite get in the way. So let's rotate this on the y-axis by 90 degrees. Just apply by that scale, then edit mode. So what we're going to do here is actually going to come into the edit mode for this leg object, and let's just select that sphere there, and we're going to do cursor to selected to bring the 3D cursor to there. I'm going to come back into our bone in edit mode, select tip here, Shift S, selection to cursor, and this will move that bone directly from, so it's moving from here down to here. And then what we can do again is we can extrude extrude on the x-axis. We do the same thing. So we come into edit mode, we select that sphere, and then cast selected, and then back into edit mode for the bone, select the tip, Shift S, selection to cursor. And then finally, we can extrude this out on the x-axis, and this one doesn't really matter. We don't need to be specific with this one. We can just eyeball that one, and then we've got our armature. So what we'll do is we will name these. So we'll call this one root, we'll call this one middle, and we'll call this one tip. Right, so we've got a tip, a middle, and a root. Smashing. Right, so first thing we'll do is we will parent this mesh to this armature. So we do Control P, but we're going to do with empty groups. And this is the fun thing about robots, is you can be very, very precise with it and you get absolutely amazing results. So then come on to your leg objects, and we're coming down to the object data properties, and you can see there it's made us some vertex groups for the root, middle, and tip. So all we need to do is we come into edit mode, and then we're going to say select all of these objects here, and we can just assign those to the tip, and then we can select this, and we can assign that to the middle, and then finally select these, and we can assign them to the root. So of course it's up to you as to which group you assign the middle ball to, because you can see here that, you know, it rotates this collar when we rotate this bone, and rotate this bone, it rotates that collar. You may want to keep this rigid and just rotate the stick. It's up to you. I prefer it like this, but yeah, so there we go. We now have a nice little armature, so we can test fit this. Just stick that in there, rotate that. So there we go. That looks kind of cool, I think. Right, so this is where things start to get interesting, because normally at this point what you will be told to do is to create an IK bone on here. So that's what we're going to do. Actually, we are going to make an IK bone. So we're going to extrude this on the X, doesn't matter about the size, then click, and then Alt P, clear parent. And then in pose mode, we click on this first bone, click on the second bone, Shift I to active bone. Now that gives us an IK chain. Cool. So normally what you do now is you would be told to bind this to a curve, but we're not going to bind this to a curve. We're going to do something completely different. So to begin with, what we're going to do is go into the IK constraint. We're going to change the chain length to just 2 because we don't want it to affect this first bone. Okay, so now we need to come back into edit mode because we're going to create another IK bone. We're going to extrude this on the Z axis. It doesn't really matter too much about which way you extrude these in edit mode, because the only thing that's important is its root location. So Alt P to clear the parent again, and then in pose mode, I'm going to click on this one first, click on this one, then Shift I to active bone. So that will give us another IK bone where we can just like this. We have this bone and this bone. So let's go back into object mode, and now we're going to create an empty. So let's call this main controller. Now I find it really useful is to come into the transform properties, and we're going to lock the Z axis because we don't really want this moving up and down. It can mess things up. So now we can move it anywhere. So we can grab it on the Y axis, for example, and then Alt G, and it brings us back to where it needs to be. So everything is going to be relative to this box now. So we're going to add loads of empties. So we're going to start with a plane axis, and I want to move this out on the X axis. And it doesn't really matter too much as to where we're going to put this, but if you line it up with the bones and the legs as close as you can, really, because it doesn't matter too much so long as you keep it on the same Y axis, and that just kind of like helps visualize things a little bit easier. So we're going to move the cursor over to this empty, and we're going to add another empty. We're going to do a sphere, and we'll scale this to like 0.2 perhaps. No, scale it to 0.1. Yeah, so we're just going to move this up a little bit, and then we're going to parent it to this axis. So I'm going to rename this. We're going to call this leg motor, and then this particular one we're going to call this leg stride length. Okay, right, so that is the first thing. So basically this sphere is going to represent the stride length. So if we were to move it up, that would be a longer stride length, and if we move it down, it's going to be a shorter stride length. So let me show you. So we come back to the armature, and we come into pose mode, and we have this IK bone here, right? So this moves this leg. So we want to come to the bone constraints tab, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a copy location constraint, and we're going to click on this stride length. Now immediately it jumps up there, and let me just enable the gizmos. I want to show you the local just so that you know exactly which axis is which. So we've got the Y axis here. Now when we rotate this, you can see there it's going up and down in the circle as you would expect. What we can do is if we come back into pose mode here, what we actually want to copy is we only want to copy the Y axis. So now when we rotate this, you can see the leg is moving only backwards and forwards. So now you can see what I mean by the stride length. if we move this up here and then we rotate this on the X again, it's moving all the way over there and all the way back there. And that's a little bit too long. So I'm just going to bring it right down here because it's only tiny legs. We only want tiny little strides. See that? That's still quite a large range of motion though. So the next thing we can do is we can create another empty. We'll make that sphere again and we'll scale that to 0.1 as we did the last one. And then we can move this down and we can rename this leg. Call it step on the last one, step height, and again let's parent that to the motor objects. Right, so this one can be a little bit finicky, so we need to now take the IK bone for this bottom one here, and we're going to do similar kind of thing. We're going to do copy location, and we're going to do the copy the location of the leg step height. And what we want on this one is we only want to copy the z-axis. When we rotate on the z, when we rotate on the x, it's going right up and down with that. So I think that's a little bit too extreme, quite frankly. So what we can do is we can come into pose mode again and we can do offset. And now this lets us adjust as we need it. So there we go. So lifting right up, and that's pretty extreme again. So you can move this up towards the center point to reduce how much stride is being affected. So there you go. It's not moving up a great deal. Still moving up some, but not a huge amount. We can just adjust this as well, just to keep it where we need to. So we can see here this sphere, this empty is in the bottom location. So this is going to be the lowest point of the stride. So we can just adjust this so it just kisses the floor. So now when we rotate this, okay, so the leg didn't quite look right the way that it was animating. And so basically what I've done is I've inverted the copy location and readjusted the step. So now when we rotate this, it looks a little bit more like it's stepping. It's like step forward, step forward. There we go. So the next thing we need to do is we need to select the leg motor. We've been previously rotating this by hand. Now we're going to get this done automatically. So in the Constraint tab, we're going to add transformation constraint. We're going to set the target to the main controller. And we want to change the target to local space and owner to local space, and we want to tick this extrapolate box here. This is to make this constant, otherwise what I'm going to show you next would only happen for, in fact I'll uncheck it and I'll show you just so you understand. Right, so what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to map this location to the rotation of this object. So we're going to say map from location, and we're going to look at the Y location. So we're just going to use its forward location for this. So Y min and Y max. We ignore the Y min, we can just say Y max, and we're going to say 1 meter. And that means that when we move this cube 1 meter, so one of these squares, it will map that to this. And so we're going to change this to rotation, and we've been rotating this on the X axis. Yeah, so I want to map it to that X rotation. So X axis, and we're going to say 360 degrees. And we need to change this X here. We need to change that to Y. So what we're saying here, just to kind of make it, this can be kind of complicated. So we're saying we're going to take the local Y location of this box, and for every 1 meter that it moves, we're going to map that to the X axis of this object, and it's going to move 300, it's going to rotate 360 degrees. So let me grab this and show you. You see how it only just jitters just there, right? But you can see the movement, and it stops when we get to here. So this is the reason that we tick the extrapolate box, because then that means that it moves like this. So you can see there, just by moving this box, we've got this nice little mechanical motion going on. So that's the basis of this procedural animation. I think that is pretty awesome, right? If you haven't learned something at this point, I'd be surprised. So anybody that's still watching that's learned something new right now, then hit that like button. Right now, obviously we need to make everything move with this box, which can be pretty simple, but we're going to do a couple more things first. So first thing, we're going to add another empty, and I want to move that to the center point. So this is going to be a plane axis in the middle, and we're going to add in another sphere, scale that to 0.1. I'm going to just move that slightly up there, and we're going to parent it to the object, right? So this is going to be called body motor. And this is just going to be called a bob height. So this is just more for like aesthetics than anything else. So I'm going to move the cursor to the center to the origin of this main body, and then Shift S selection to cursor. That's just to move it to there. Now, one thing I probably should have done prior to doing that is come into the object properties, and if we click on the viewport display in front, right, and that will always render it in front of everything else. And I find that that's really useful for this particular setup when you've got all of these empties that kind of get hidden behind things. So I just need to quickly hide that, grab that little guy there and in front there. And then that is, so we can still see that. And it just helps us when we need to adjust the size here, then we can do. So all we do here is we take the main body object. We don't need to do any bones or anything special there. And we can add another object constraint, and we're going to copy the location, and we're going to copy the bob height, and we're going to target just the z-axis. And we're going to do the same thing with the motor. We're going to go to transformation. The target is going to be main controller. We're going to extrapolate, change it to local space. We're going to map from location. We're going to change the y max to 1. We're going to map it to the rotation. We're going to rotate it on the x-axis. We're going to remember to change that to the y. So we're mapping the x-axis from the y-axis in this section. And then we're going to change this to 360. And so you'll be able to see now when we move this, that bobs up and down as well. So you can adjust the height of this if you want it to bob more or less, if you just wanted a very, very subtle kind of up and down, just like that. Or you could have an extreme, you wouldn't want to do this, but just to illustrate the point, bob, 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 bob. That's like a piston almost. Yeah, so if you wanted to make like a hydraulic press video, then bam, 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 or you could use that as like a car engine if you wanted. But we're going to grab this right down. We want it just only very, very subtle. We do not want much. Okay. So now we're going to take this and we're going to shift Control P, and we're going to parent that to this. So there we go. The main body, Control P, parent it to that. Now the body's moving with it. Right. So this one also has to parent, but we need to do another step with this one. So we come into pose mode and we grab this root bone here, and then we need to come into bone constraints, and we're going to add a child of constraint, and we're going to set, right, do you know what? I need to do one more thing first. So the child of constraint is probably the biggest pain in the bum that I have ever come across. So what I need to do is I'm just going to hide this. Just click on this little eyeball and it removes that constraints influence. And now we do child of, and we can do the body, right? So then we can come back in and then we can re-enable it. And the reason we do that is because that when you apply the child of modifier, the child of constraint, sorry, it uses the current world position to set its offset. And that can be kind of frustrating because it makes things just go all over the place, right? So now just need to parent that motor to the empty, and there we go. So we've got a little leg, just bib, 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 bib. Now, is it me, or does that look like it's, oh no, that's working, I think. Is it? That's going backwards, isn't it? Or is it? I can't even get my head around that. Right, Alt G. Let me just try something. So if things are not going the right way, you can just rotate on the Z-axis, the motor, by 180 degrees, and then it will, yeah, there we go. I thought it was going backwards. There you go. It kind of bobs along with the thing. Right, so we want more legs now, don't we? So this makes things... This is where we have to be very meticulous. So pay very close attention to what I'm doing here, because I know if you do one thing wrong, it can really mess things up, right? So first things first, we're going to disable this copy location constraint on the main body. Next, we're going to come into pose mode, and we're going to disable the child of as well, right? So let's go back into objects mode, and what we want to do is we're going to move to a new collection. We're going to call this leg front left, right? And I'm just going to hide that so we know what we've moved and what we haven't. So we need to move all this leg front left. We need to move this and this leg front left, right? So now we've got a full collection, just this leg, and this just makes things nice and easy. So let's hide this. So this is our leg. This is the full leg rig, and what we want to do is we want to duplicate this collection. So duplicate collection just here, and we can say this is leg back left. To make things easy to select, come up to this restriction, this filter thing here, and click on the restriction of this little arrow, and then we can untick that, and now we can just select everything there, and we can just move that, right? So just going to quickly change this. Oh no, we have it on global anyway, that's fine, right? So we can just move that. And let's bring back in the body so we can see what's what. And I'm unchecking the select robot body. So now I can select that, I can select everything there. We can bring it to about there, that looks center. So now we can select the body again, and there you go. So the legs are moving in sync. We don't want that, but it's easily fixed, right? So we come back into the side mode. So when the motors turn, you can see that it's following this top sphere here, isn't it? So what we can say is we can rotate this on the X by 90 degrees, and that brings it into the center. And then we can also take this motor at this side and rotate that X negative 90. And you can see that the knees are knocking there. They're a little bit too close. So let's make sure we can't select the robot body, and we will uncheck the back left, and then we can just grab everything here, and we can just move it it just a little bit, probably to there will be fine. And then we can change the selection to the back and bring that to about, that looks about right, to about there. Okay, so now we can re-enable the selection of the body, and you can see there now the legs, they're moving a little bit more like they should be. So there we go. Right, so let's now reposition our mech with Alt-R and Alt-G just to make sure it's in the right place. And what we're going to do is we want to copy these across to the other side. So same tedious process, disable the selection for the body. So what I'm wanting to do now, I've disabled the selection of both of these because we need to just duplicate these collections. So we've got the front left, I'll enable selection on that for a second. So we're going to call this leg. So the front left becomes the back right, and then I'm going to duplicate the back left, and so this comes leg front right. So you'll see in a minute why we're doing that. So now we've got the front right and the back right here, and all we need to do is just grab everything there, Shift C to reset the cursor. We're going to come up to the 3D cursor pivot point here, and then all we do is we rotate Z 180, and so it'll rotate it around that pivot point there. Now this is not quite ready. It's not a simple case of just rotating it, as you'll see in a second. So those legs, they're going backwards. So what we do, rotate Z, oops, let's put it back to the median point, rotate Z 180. Same for this one, rotate Z 180. So there we go. It's a little bit more as it should be. But one thing you'll probably notice, doesn't quite look right. Oh, no, it does. It's fine. Ignore me. I've done it right first time this time. There we go. So let's reset this. Are those legs right? Yeah, that's right, isn't it? Yeah, sorry, I'm just doubting myself. Okay, so now come back to the main body, and we're going to re-enable this copy location. And then in all of the legs, so you want to multi-select all of the legs and Control Tab to go into pose mode. And we come down to the bone constraint tab. And so what we're going to do for each of these is we're going to click the clear inverse button, set inverse, and then click on the eyeball, and it won't move. And then clear, set, eyeball. So let me just show you what will happen if I do eyeball first, right? So it jumps all the way across there. You don't want that. That just kind of like freaks everyone out. So clear inverse, set inverse, and then the eyeball, and then clear inverse, set inverse, and the eyeball. And now all of these are correctly parented to this object. And look at that. Look at that. How awesome is that? Got a cute little walk. And the thing that I love about this so much, let me just come into timeline editor, right? So let's just bring this back here, and let's set a location keyframe, right? And then let's come over to the end. Let's come to 250. Let's bring it over here, and let's set another location keyframe, right? So when you play it, kind of slow, but let's just add here, like maybe 120, right? Let's like 100 maybe. Add another location keyframe, and then 120. Add another location keyframe. In fact, let's just make this just a little bit faster, just because the animation in general is really slow, right? So what we can do is we can just stretch these out a little bit. This will make this animation here a little bit slower. So when we play this animation, you see how when he slows down, the legs slow down as well. How awesome is that? So fast movement, slow movement, fast movement. And this is what I mean by procedural. You don't need to worry about having to, if this was bound to a curve, if you wanted him to perform that motion there where it slows down, you would have to also keyframe the speed that the animation curve is processing at on each of the curves. And to me, that just sounds like an absolute nightmare. So this is the way forward. This is absolutely the way forward. And the great thing about this is, look, when you rotate it as well, let me just zoom in there so you can see it. When you rotate him, the legs are moving as well. Look at that. The legs are going. So you can do these rotation animations and movement animations. And all you need to do is keyframe the rotation, the location of this little box. And that's it. And that will make it so simple. Now that you've taken the time to set up this rig, then all you need to do is position it now. That's it. You position it, you keyframe it, you go. It's a little bit of a setup, but it's worth it in the end for your animation. You could bop out hours worth of animation to this guy now really, really simply. And yeah. So what we could probably do now is think about the making it a little bit cuter. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but if you're interested in sort of adding a little bit of personality to this guy, I mean, there's a reason we put this LCD screen in. I love LCD screens. It allows you to add a lot of personality to your creations without needing to worry about things like, are your edge loops okay or whatever. You can animate these faces really, really easily. So let's just come into edit mode first of all, and let's just select selects the LCD, and what we're going to do is we're going to unwrap this, and we can just do project from view. That's fine. That'll give us a nice flat plane to work on. I've loaded in an image of some eyes, right? And you want to get these positioned at 0.5 by 0.5, right? This will center it in the center of the screen, and so you can increase the scale of this. You can increase it like up to the boundary, or make it smaller, whatever, or you can make it bigger, right? If you want to make it bigger, so this will mean that the eyes are kind of tiny inside the screen. Let me just reconnect the shade. So you'll see that they're kind of like repeating. What you can do is you can come into your image sequence here. You can have a basic, just like you don't have to have an image sequence, but if you want, you can have an image sequence. You can change this to clip, right? And it'll just keep those eyes there. I like big eyes personally, so I'm going to just bring this right here. So then they kind of like fill the space. Now these eyes are used in a different project, which is why they're the wrong color. But you can probably just sort of maybe get a color ramp, plug this in here, and then we can change this to a nice powdery blue, I suppose, just like that. I'd say that looks all right, doesn't it? Yeah, there we go. Fix that. So now if we come back to the timeline, bring this here, so it'll play the animation of the texture. How brilliant is that? It's a really cool way of adding a little bit of personality to the robot. So other things that you can do, which you might find really helpful, is so if you want to create another, you'll be sick of empties after this tutorial, I swear. Right, so if we create an empty, we can move this into the set collection, bring that back in, and then we can call this. In fact, let's not move that. Let's move that into the body, robot body section, I should say. And we can get this, and we can put in a constraint. We can say track 2, and then we can focus on this object here. So what we really want to be doing is, if you come across to the object gizmos, change this to local. We can see where his forward axis is. So this is his positive Y. So we want to be targeting his negative Y, and the up axis, of course, is Z. And so it'll point to that. But we don't want a robot like looking up like that necessarily. So we can do a limit rotation constraint, and then we can limit the X and the Y, and it'll only rotate on the Z axis. You see? Now, if you don't like the legs moving with the body, you can actually change the parent. So you can say, for example, let's just add another empty. So you can add another empty in there and bring it up here. And so parent that to the main cube, and then instead, how we went through and we added the child of constraint, we can actually parent that to the empty instead. And then so all you do is, instead of parenting these to this object, you'd parent them to this object, and then you'd parent the main body to the empty. And so that'll give this like the extra level of freedom without affecting the transform of these objects. So there we go. We can have it looking at that particular object, and it doesn't affect the transform of the leggies. So yeah, pretty lengthy tutorial, but hopefully you've taken something away from that. If you have, please drop me a comment to let me know what you think of this tutorial, the idea. I'm really curious for feedback on this one. If you did enjoy this, then maybe hit that subscribe button, and I'm going to try and put out content similar quality and standard in the future. And please leave me a thumbs up so that YouTube knows this is a good video, and hopefully you'll send me more traffic and I'll build my channel, and then I'll be able to provide you with more and more content. So yeah, thank you for sticking by, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.